The idea of moral dilemma and sacrifice in this story lies at the very heart of the maid's actions, and it is this very struggle that makes her decision both tragic and humanly understandable. To understand the depth of her choice, one has to look not only at the act of stealing itself but at the background circumstances that pushed her into this corner. Stealing money from anyone is already an act society condemns, but when a maid takes it from a billionaire she works for, it automatically falls into the narrative of betrayal of trust. However, when peeling back the layers, the motive isn't greed, ambition, or malice. It is desperation born out of love for her child, who is dying and in dire need of medical treatment that she cannot afford. This love, raw and unshakable, puts her in a position where the lines between morality and survival blur until she can no longer tell them apart. Imagine being in her shoes. Every day she wakes up before dawn, puts on her uniform, and travels across the city to serve a man who lives in a mansion of glass and marble, where chandeliers hang like stars and money flows as though it has no end. Her hands scrub the polished floors until they gleam, her body aches from endless chores, and yet, when her day is over, she returns to a small rented room where her daughter lies on a worn-out bed, struggling to breathe. The doctors have already told her that the child's condition is serious, that without urgent surgery or costly medication, she will not make it. But in a society where medical care is a privilege and not a right, the maid knows that her monthly wage, barely enough for food and rent, will never be enough. No matter how many overtime hours she works, no matter how many years she sacrifices to labor, the money will not come in time to save her little girl. That is where the moral dilemma begins. Every day at work, as she dusts the billionaire's offices and vacuums the thick carpets, she sees the sheer scale of wealth lying around in plain sight. Priceless antiques, golden pens, stacks of crisp currency left carelessly on a desk, wallets stuffed with credit cards, and a walk-in closet filled with jewelry worth more than she could ever dream of earning. For the billionaire, these are possessions, symbols of status, things that can be replaced with the swipe of a card. For her, any one of those items could buy her daughter another month of life. The contrast is unbearable. The temptation grows stronger each day, not because she wishes to own those luxuries, but because she envisions her daughter in a hospital bed, hooked up to machines that could keep her alive. She imagines the doctor's words, "We can try, but you must pay the deposit first." She hears her daughter's soft cries at night when the pain becomes too much. In that moment, morality does not vanish, but it bends under the weight of maternal love. Stealing is wrong. She knows this more than anyone, for she has taught her daughter to be honest, to never take what is not hers, to walk the path of integrity even in poverty. And yet, when the choice is between watching her daughter die slowly in agony or breaking the very principles she believes in, the conflict tears her apart. This is the essence of sacrifice. She knows that stealing the billionaire's money will not just be a crime in the eyes of the law, but a betrayal of trust. It could cost her job, her reputation, and even her freedom. But she is willing to risk it all. For her, the greater crime would be to stand by and do nothing while her daughter fades away. In her mind, her hands are already stained not by theft, but by helplessness. It becomes a question of what weighs heavier on her conscience, the act of stealing from a man who has more than he could ever spend, or the act of letting her child die because she was too afraid to act. This internal war eats at her day and night. When she enters the mansion, she feels the weight of unseen eyes, as though guilt already follows her. She thinks about her daughter every time she polishes the billionaire's gold-plated silverware or folds his suits that cost more than her yearly salary. She knows he barely notices her presence. To him, she is just another employee, invisible and replaceable. Yet to her daughter, she is everything: mother, caretaker, provider, protector. That disparity deepens her dilemma. She asks herself over and over, if a man has so much that he wouldn't even notice what was missing, does it truly count as theft when it saves a life? Or is it simply taking what the universe should have allowed her in the first place, a balancing of scales that have long been unjust? It is not that she does not think about alternatives. She considers loans, but no bank would give money to a maid with no collateral. She considers charity, but she has already begged everyone she knows, and they too are poor, struggling to feed themselves. She even considers asking the billionaire directly, but fear holds her back. She imagines the humiliation of being dismissed, or worse, being accused of manipulation. She has seen how rich men guard their fortunes, how they view the poor as schemers, always looking for handouts. The thought of her plea being mocked or rejected is too painful to bear, and so she swallows her pride in silence. That silence, however, only strengthens the sense of urgency that drives her toward the forbidden choice. When she finally crosses the line and takes the money, it is not an act of greed but of ultimate sacrifice. In that moment, she gives up her own safety, her livelihood, and her dignity for the chance to buy her daughter another breath. Her hands may tremble as she slips the bills into her bag, but her heart beats only for her child. She does not think of herself, of prison, of shame, of consequences. She thinks only of the doctor's hands working quickly to save her daughter's fragile body, of the chance to see her daughter smile again, even if just for a little longer. This is what makes her dilemma profound. It is not the question of whether stealing is wrong, society has already answered that. It is the question of whether stealing is still wrong when the intent is pure love, when the action is not for self-benefit but for sacrifice. It is the gray area where morality and necessity collide, where laws written on paper clash with the unwritten laws of the heart. Philosophers have long debated whether intent matters more than action, whether love can justify a crime, and whether survival bends morality into something new. In her story, these debates become flesh and blood, no longer abstract but painfully real. Her sacrifice is not only financial or physical, it is spiritual. She sacrifices her own moral certainty, the values she has lived by all her life, for the sake of someone else. Few acts of love reach this level, because it requires one to break themselves in order to save another. This sacrifice, though born of desperation, reveals the intensity of maternal love in its rawest form. It shows how far a mother can go, how she can challenge even the foundations of society's laws and expectations when her child's life is at stake. The unexpected billionaire's response is where the story transforms from a simple tale of theft and consequence into something layered, thought-provoking, and emotionally charged. In the eyes of the world, the natural course of action would be simple: the maid stole, and therefore she should be punished. After all, society thrives on rules, and wealth especially protects itself with the shield of law and order. But what makes the billionaire's reaction shocking is not that he follows this expected script but that he strays away from it. His decision opens a doorway to the complexities of human behavior, revealing how even those who seem untouchable in their towers of power can be shaken by a single act of desperation that forces them to confront their own humanity. The first instinct people imagine in someone of his stature is anger, betrayal, and the pursuit of justice against the wrongdoer. A billionaire, accustomed to authority and control, would naturally want to preserve his dominance by making an example out of the maid. Firing her, prosecuting her, or publicly humiliating her would be the common expectation, as it aligns with the power imbalance that defines their relationship. Yet when he learns not just of the theft but of the reason behind it, that the maid risked everything to save her dying daughter, the script no longer seems so straightforward. At this juncture, the billionaire's response could easily have been one of indifference, acknowledging her plight but still enforcing the law, reasoning that sympathy cannot excuse crime. But instead, his choice takes a surprising turn that shocks not only the maid but everyone who witnesses or hears of it. This shock lies in the shift from power to compassion, from punishment to understanding. For the billionaire, this may be the first time in years, perhaps decades, where he looks beyond wealth, contracts, and possessions to see the raw human struggle in someone so far below his station. He has lived in abundance for so long that money has become abstract, a number on a screen, a resource that flows endlessly with no tangible weight. But when faced with the maid's story, when he sees her trembling hands and her broken spirit, he suddenly confronts what money means in the life of someone without it. For him, losing a few thousand is nothing. For her, it is the difference between life and death. That realization sparks an internal reckoning. What shocks people most is not just that he forgives her but the way he channels his wealth toward a cause far greater than punishment. Forgiveness itself is already unexpected, as it defies the hard boundaries that separate master and servant, employer and employee. But his response goes deeper than forgiveness. He chooses to help, to extend a lifeline rather than cut one off. In doing so, he redefines power, not as control, not as dominance, but as the ability to transform lives with compassion. That moment unsettles the natural order society is used to, because it reveals that power does not have to be cruel, and wealth does not have to be selfish. The shock comes not only from the kindness itself but also from its scale. Imagine the billionaire paying off the hospital bills in full, arranging the best doctors for the maid's daughter, and ensuring she receives every treatment necessary to survive. What once was stolen in secret and shame becomes replaced tenfold, openly and generously. People who hear of this act are left stunned, for it contradicts the stereotypes they hold about billionaires as cold, detached figures hoarding their fortunes. Instead, they see a man who could have crushed the maid with legal might but chose instead to uplift her. The world, conditioned to expect cruelty from those in power, cannot comprehend such benevolence without astonishment. There is also an element of personal transformation in his shocking response. It is possible that the billionaire's decision does not come from a place of pre-existing kindness but from an awakening triggered by the situation. Perhaps he himself once faced hardship in his early days, long before he built his empire, and the maid's struggle resonates with a part of him that he buried under success. Or perhaps he has children of his own and imagines what it would feel like to watch them suffer without the means to save them. This personal connection deepens the impact of his choice because it shows vulnerability in a man the world perceives as untouchable. To shock others is not simply to act kindly but to reveal that even those at the top are still bound by universal emotions like love, empathy, and fear of loss. The billionaire's reaction also shocks because it challenges the societal narrative about justice. In the world's eyes, justice would have been served by arresting the maid, ensuring that theft is punished and that order is maintained. But his response redefines justice, not as punishment, but as restoration. By helping her, he does not simply erase the theft but rewrites the entire equation. The maid is no longer a criminal, but a mother given a chance. The billionaire is no longer a victim, but a benefactor. This shift confounds those who expect rigid boundaries between right and wrong, law and crime, wealth and poverty. His decision creates discomfort in people who cling to simple binaries because it shows that morality is often fluid, shaped by empathy and context rather than rules alone. Another element that shocks everyone is the ripple effect of his choice. Acts of compassion from those in power rarely remain private, they spread, becoming stories that inspire, provoke, and unsettle. When others learn that the billionaire chose to save the maid's daughter rather than destroy her life, it forces them to question their own views of generosity and punishment. Some may admire him deeply, holding him up as a rare example of a wealthy man who uses his fortune for good. Others may criticize him, arguing that he is setting a dangerous precedent by excusing crime. But regardless of where people fall, the act itself cannot be ignored. It has already shaken assumptions and challenged norms. The shock also stems from the contrast between expectation and reality. In a world where inequality is stark, where the wealthy often distance themselves from the struggles of the poor, kindness from a billionaire feels unnatural, almost unbelievable. People expect hardness, selfishness, or indifference because they have seen it repeated so often. That is why his response is not just surprising but almost disruptive. It breaks through cynicism, offering a glimpse of a different world where power is wielded not to crush but to heal. What truly deepens the shock is the silence of the maid herself. When she hears his decision, she does not know how to respond. She has already resigned herself to punishment, already imagined the shame of handcuffs or the despair of unemployment. She does not ask for forgiveness, because in her heart she believes she has wronged him beyond repair. But when he not only forgives her but also helps her, she is left speechless. This silence, heavy with disbelief, mirrors the astonishment of everyone around her. The people in his circle, his colleagues, his family, and even the staff in the mansion, all stand stunned by the billionaire's unexpected mercy. His action speaks louder than words, cutting through the noise of social expectation. The shock does not end with the immediate outcome. It lingers, transforming relationships and perceptions long after. The maid, once a shadow in the billionaire's house, becomes a symbol of resilience and of the hidden humanity that wealth often overlooks. The billionaire, once seen as merely a figure of power and money, becomes something else entirely, a man capable of compassion so profound that it redefines him in the eyes of others. This transformation, of her from thief to mother, of him from master to savior, is what etches the shock permanently into the minds of those who hear the story. Even more unsettling is that his response forces society to confront uncomfortable truths about inequality. If he can afford to save her daughter so easily, why did it require theft to bring attention to her plight? Why does the world accept that millions like her suffer in silence while wealth pools in the hands of a few? The shock is not only at his kindness but at the revelation of the system's cruelty, that such acts of desperation are born not from greed but from injustice. His response magnifies this truth, shining a light on disparities that most people prefer to ignore. The billionaire's decision shocks everyone not just because it is kind, but because it defies the architecture of power, money, and justice that society has built. It challenges expectations, reshapes morality, and reveals that even in the darkest of situations, compassion can still appear where it is least expected.